Oh, hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. During the talk and then interactive fireside chat tonight, we'll focus on how to use storytelling to create and present an effective UX portfolio that actually gets you hired. We have invited an awesome guest speaker who have done that successfully and now has quite a bit of experience in the field. We'll share lots of insights about his journey and answer the questions, and his, cover a lot of his lessons. And then we'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a few minutes. All right, so for those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael. I'm the founder of a company called Beginex. It is a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways, and without quitting their jobs. Right, and we'll tell you guys more about that and at the end, since lots of people ask, and it can be a great opportunity for some of you. I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a background for credibility purposes. We have run quite many cohorts and helped probably around 150 people or so get hired into UX roles so far. We'll tell you a bit more once again about the program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. Of course, that part is completely optional for you. Awesome. So here are some of the companies that the grads were hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition journey. So Xinran, great to have you here. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, Michael, thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all from all across the United States. Some folks are from the West Coast. I'm based in New York City. The weather is getting a little bit cooler. So anyway, so it's a good time to talk about things about UX, and storytelling is something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really excited to share with you something that I learned, and I hope to answer as many questions as possible. A brief intro about myself. My name is Xinran Ma. I'm a product designer based in New York City. I work for the company called Redfin, which is a real estate tech company. And the team I'm working on is primarily focusing on helping homeowners sell their home, basically helping them get in touch with Redfin easily so that we can help them based on their needs. I'm also a design mentor at ADP List for the past 2 years. And I also wrote a book about career change. If you search my name on Amazon, you'll probably see it, just published a few months ago. For storytelling, I know it's such a broad topic. So today I will talk about 3 major parts of the topic. The first part is about what is storytelling and why it is important in product design. The second part, I would talk about the notions of portfolio and why the case study presentation is important and how that can help you become a more compelling product designer. The third part, I will introduce some simple storytelling tips and how you can integrate that into your case studies. Sounds good to you all? I know it's interesting because I'm only seeing Michael's face and Mika's face, but I saw some thumbs up. Perfect. Great. Awesome. Let's do it. I wanted to start off with a question. Can you think about a movie that you really enjoy watching and the plot that you remember from that movie? The plot referring to a very special moment of that movie that you still remember. Feel free to put it in the chat. It can be as simple as one sentence, a very memorable moment of a movie. In the meantime, I can also share mine. While I haven't watched that many movies, I did watch some really good ones, and I still remember even today. All right. Sorry. quite the end of Barbies. I haven't watched that movie, to be honest. I've heard great things about it. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. So it comes over the hill at the end of the Homeward Bound. All right. It sounds like a few of you mentioned about the end of the movie. And there's also one scene of the movie I want to share that I still remember today. 15 years ago, I watched the movie. Probably you all watch. Most of you may have watched it, I suppose. It's called the Shawshank Redemption. And 15 years later, I don't even remember the name of the main characters. And to be honest, um, Shawshank Redemption, I don't remember why they got into jail, and what did they say during their time in the jail. I don't remember anything about it. But there's one moment I still remember. That is towards the end of the movie, the main character managed to break out of jail. And I remember that scene. It was a night. There was like raining. The rain fall onto the main character's face, and it's the moment of freedom. And I still remember that moment. And I think that's a beauty of a storytelling or a movie plot that even after so many years, I still remember the key moment of the movie. And there are a lot of things about about movies in general, which is interesting. I can give you an example that I don't know if how many of you actually watched the movie. You can put it in the chat if you watch the movie, The Shawshank Redemption. You can say yes. If you haven't watched it, you can say no, whatever you want. I saw a thumb up. I've seen the movie. I've seen it 6 times, Matt. Okay, so actually you're going to be a master of storytelling for sure. Just joking. All right. And there's one thing about the movie, right? It didn't really have to fall under a chronological order. In other words, it didn't say day one, the main character was digging the hole. Day two, the main character is digging the hole even deeper. Day three, he probably took a rest. And day four, he was doing something else. It didn't actually talk about that, right? They definitely did talk about some special moments, but it didn't say it in a day-to-day fashion. Why? Because the movie only lasts for around 2 hours, right? And within the time limit, it's impossible to fit in all the days, and it's very hard to talk about everything, right? Within 2 hours, you have to uh, skip certain type of things, right? You have to skip 15 years of hard work of digging holes, but only expose or review the result of the journey, which is he escaped it from a tunnel that he had been digging for 15 years. So that's one lesson I learned, that you don't have to follow a chronological order. And there's a lesson learned as well, is that you can actually condense many things into a special moment. Because that special moment of breaking out of jail, it does not only involve hard work of digging. It also, there's a symbol, it's a symbol of freedom, the symbol of being free. So there's a lot of emotions or conflicts or tension is actually boiled down to a special moment. And that tension is actually resolved suddenly by he successfully escaped it out of the jail. And why I'm talking about about movies, because movie is actually a very special tool, or it's a very good example of using storytelling to leave memorable impression on people. And here comes to my second question, is that what do you think storytelling means? Like, what is storytelling? Like, if you open up internet or even LinkedIn, you see this kind of post all the time that designers need to learn storytelling because it's so important. But what is storytelling? I don't know if anyone can try to summarize into one sentence or a phrase. You can put it in the chat if you want. Storytelling is sharing experiences. I think that's I like how simple that you put into words. A narrative that features conflict and resolution. That's even more profound. Cash, moving someone through a narrative. That's well said as well. A narrative that connects dots. That's great. Interaction, narrative with beginning, middle, and end. Ability to convey an event while engaging the audience. Okay, so apparently you all are pros in storytelling, because I think those are very good answers I've seen so far. Mary, communicating events in a succinct way that shows feeling and purpose. Emptying. I really love the answers. Okay, so my version. There is a very professional academic version online. I don't even want to bother reading it because it's hard to understand. It's talking about like social academic, like social psychological type of things, or like sharing experience, something like that. But if I were to put it in simple terms, I think it's just about telling compelling stories, stories that can leave an impression, stories that are memorable, and most importantly, stories that can make you come off as a strong product designer. And this is very important because everyone has gone through a lot of like stories, right? You work hard as a product designer, you really wanted to break into the industry, because I noticed that some of you mentioned that you work in different fields right now, right? Even like UX researcher, and also some of you, actually a current product designer, great. And some of you are trying to pursue a career in UX UI design. And Justin from San Diego, I think you're a student who are looking to start a career in UX UI, and also people based in the from the government space. No matter what, there are so many. Everyone has different interesting background, and if you think from the interviewer's lens, usually interview happens on a random working day, right? She or he may be very tired. There's only 30 minutes to talk with someone. Probably they're not even ready to listen to a story, and they have to go through many interviewees, and it's really easy to lose track. But when you present your case studies, if you can leave an impression that you are a strong product designer, it will really help you secure the job. And that is the beauty of storytelling, because there are many of us who have strong case studies, but some of us struggle to put into a compelling case study that actually can win you the offer. And that is the importance of storytelling. And I know many people talking about this topic, online through writing. But to be honest, sometimes I feel like I was hoping to get a crisper answer of how to use it in the presentation or on my portfolio, but sometimes they only stop at the concept level. That's why over the past few years, I've been really thinking of how to integrate case studies into the career transition process, or into the learning process as a junior product designer, so that we can embrace it and level up our career. All right. After talking this point, I wanted to talk about the concept of portfolio, because I know you've probably seen the title of this event. We were talking about how to use storytelling towards portfolio, but I really wanted to clarify the term of portfolio, because portfolio is, when talking about portfolio, the immediate reaction is the portfolio website, is the site that people are looking at. But I wanted to add one thing, which is really important, is that there's also a component. If we speak of portfolio in a broad term, it also includes the presentation of the case study. Because eventually, the portfolio website is not enough. You need to present it in the interviews. And if you know how to present a cohesive, strong story, you have a highly chance of being hired. And I think the case study presentation is so important, yet overlooked. I can tell a very typical story. I can use my story as an example because I switched careers from architecture to product design. It looks like this. I signed up a Coursera course about UX, and I studied about, I think, 1 month or 1 month and a half, going through all the basic terms. And then I started to build on my first case study for a few months. And then I started to build on my second case study for a few months, and my third for a few months, and then spend on my portfolio for multiple months. And finally, after those hard work, I think I'm ready to apply. So I started applying, started like networking, whatever. And then after a few months, I started to get more and more interviews. And then the thing, but the problem is when I got my interview, I realized, oh no, I didn't have enough time to prepare for my interview presentation. What happened usually, I only have a week or a few days to put together my presentation deck. As a matter of fact, for my first product design interview, actually I got it from Facebook. I only have about, I think about 5 days or like a week to prepare for it. So it ended up to be a disaster because I worked really, really hard to put it into a cohesive story. And then I realized that it wasn't cohesive at all. The reason why? It was because when I was working on the case study, I followed the linear approach as well, similar with my career transition. It's like, okay, so this is the business goal. And then I started with research, user research. And then I think about the concept. I think about the flow. I go through mid-fi wireframes, hi-fi wireframes, and user testing, whatever. So I followed a very linear process. However, in the interview process, there are only about two, I'm not even exaggerating. You probably only have subtract your intro, subtract Q&A, you probably only have 15 minutes to talk about case study. So imagine if you get interviews and you only have 15 minutes to talk about a case study, then you really have to talk about a strong story. But that was the moment I realized that I've worked so hard on so many things, on so many design artifacts, but I couldn't form a cohesive story. And that was one of my realization, is that I waited towards till the end, till the invitation of interview, that I start to prepare for the presentation. But in reality, those are all cohesive. The portfolio website, the case study presentation, and they are all cohesive piece. In other words, if you can get a clarity early on that how you're going to present a project in the interview within 15 minutes, if you can have a clarity early on, you can save a lot of time right now, even if you are working on your project right now, and focus on the most important things, the things that can help you form a strong story, which I will talk about shortly. And that can save a lot of time because then you realize that I maybe don't have to work on all the user flows, because at the end of the day, I'm going to only talk about one key user flow. And that is the moment that you realize that, there are a lot of things, a lot of the user research, maybe I don't have to do, because at the end of the day, it's all about that story. And the user research, only the user research that speak to that problem help contribute to the story. The user research, the design artifacts that are not integral to that story are actually of low priority. They can only be noises in interviews. That's why in the interview preparation, I realized that I have so many stuff, so much stuff. I really wish they could see my Figma file, but it's impossible for the interviewer within such a short of an attention span look at all the hard work that you did, because at the end of the day, They don't really care about your hard work. They care about your story, your competency. So, Alina, good to know that you're switching from architecture. All right. And feel free to put a question in the chat, and I believe Michael and Mika will capture the question, and after this talk, there will be an interview session, and they will followed by a Q&A session. So we'd love to answer all the questions. All right, so I was talking about a linear process, and try not to think about that story too late. As early as possible, I would say even at the middle, towards the middle of the project, when you're working on the project, or the second half of the project, you can already start thinking about what does that story look like. Okay, so I'm going to repeat myself. Imagine if we only have 15 minutes to talk about your project. What would you say? And you can reflect on your favorite case study of yours right now. Think about it. What would you say? And to make this question even simpler, I have another version, and it's also a quick exercise. If you have to present your story in 1 minute, what would you say? And I'm curious your thoughts. You can put some simple words in the chat, like simple keywords that if you only have 1 minute to present your favorite case study to the interviewers, what would you say? What is the most important things they want to say? It can be keywords, it can be a key components, but whatever that is, I think this exercise can help you inform the strategy of storytelling. And as always, I can give my version. As I talk, you can always feel free to put in things in the chat. And I'm going to share the version that I learned after interviewed many candidates, and I've also interviewed many companies as well. And to me, that really boils down to 2 things or 3 things, well, however you wanted to put it. But the key components that I think, if I were only have to present my case study within 1 minute, is problem and solution. If I only have 10 seconds, then I will only present solution, because that is the most important. The solution means the final design. If I have 1 minute, I will talk about the problem and the solution. And I would also very briefly talk about context, because without context, it's very hard for people to get your idea, right? Like out of nowhere. So I will start with a very brief context using 10 seconds. Like, this is a product that I help what kind of company build up whatever products they have, whatever goals. And then I quickly talk about the problem. The problem I'm trying to solve here is, the problem also covers customer problem and business problem. I know for many bootcamp graduates, they really struggle with the business problem part. But I would encourage you to think about the business impact as well. I think it's always a bonus thing to mention. So I can give you an example. The customer problem, let's say, is about, let's say, I'm just looking at random things. The customer problem is that the customers are really struggle with navigating the app, so they drop off. And as the business impact is, because people dropping off, so the business actually losing contacts, right? Because less people contact them. And that is very severe. And that's why we have to think of a solution. So in this case, I actually combine, I still centered around the customer problem, which is also known as the user problem. But I also add a layer of the business implication. or you can call it business problem. So that problem component is also important because it set a foundation for your solution. And right after the problem, I will talk about solution. The solution here is the final design, because I only have 1 minute, right? And yeah, like you may think, like, wow, that sounds like that sounds like so short. What about the design process? What about user research? What about competitive analysis, or say user testing, or even success metrics? And don't get me wrong, those are still very important. But if you really have to boil it down to 30 seconds or 1 minute, it's really about problem solution. That's how important it is. And after that clarity, you can still build more things. Like, oh, I want to build this, I want to build that, I want to add more user research. But all of them are actually we are trying to speak to this problem solution statement. And whatever things that are not like relevant, maybe you did some competitive analysis on like whatever things of the app, which is nothing related to the navigation problem, then it can be a distraction. And I was, even when you're working on this project, in the middle of working on this project, you can also think about what is a potential problem. I know their problem can be very broad, right? What is the kind of problem you're trying to solve? And if you close your eyes, what would be some solutions that directly speak to that problem? And if you have that clarity, you may realize that maybe there are some user flows that you don't have to do, like onboarding flow, for example, because that is not directly part of the problem you're solving. And after all, there's not a lot of time during the interview. So I think that can give you a lot of clarity to avoid the problem that I said. Case study. Let's see, I'm reading a comment really quick. Perhaps a person going through the case study would be interested in knowing what outcome was achieved. Yes, if you only have 1 minute, then the outcome is definitely very important, because people just don't have time. And you may also ask, hey, wait a second, what about the storytelling of product portfolio website, right? It is also, don't get me wrong, it is still somewhat important, but I think the case study presentation is way more important than the storytelling on the portfolio website. And they're a whole piece. I can give you an example. For portfolio website, it's just like people don't have a lot of time looking at it. I can give you an example of my company. So about 2 years ago, we had an opening of product designer. And remember, on the first day, there was about almost 200 applicants on day one. And you can imagine how much time the hiring manager or recruiter can spend on every portfolio. If I have to look through like 175 portfolios, it's really, really quick. It may be as quick as like 30 seconds. It can be as long as 4 minutes, right? So within that short amount of time, the storytelling of your portfolio website still matters, but it's really unguided, because you never know how people would actually read your portfolio. They maybe go straight to your about me page, or they maybe go straight to your second case study or the first case study. They probably scan it up and down, and that's it. It's hard to guide them. Whereas if you think from the lens of the case study presentation in the interviews, you will have 15 minutes of time. You can get the full attention of your interviewers to talk about a strong story. And I think that is the moment that the storytelling could be the most effective and powerful. And you use that. If you have a clarity of that, then in my opinion, the portfolio website is so much easier, that you don't have to spend too much time on, because you already have this like time constraint, such like a movie, right? Movie only have like 1.5 hours or 2 hours. If you have the time constraint to get clarity, and then when you think of your portfolio website, which can take you infinite amount of time to build, it's so much easier because you can just like carry over the core components of your case study onto your portfolio site, as opposed to spend 3 months crafting a portfolio website, but you don't have a cohesive story to tell within 15 minutes. That's that. And I want to talk about the core components. Well, I think there's one thing I didn't mention is about the storytelling. When I'm talking about storytelling, I know some people have mentioned there's like, if you Google online, there's like resolution, like start, middle, finish. I think that's pretty easy to understand. There's also some techniques that is very, very academic. Like I don't think we need to get to that deep. So the storytelling tips that we will share today is very simple. It's not like, oh, you have to build a magic curve of a whatever, because after all, we're not fiction writers, right? You don't have to do it on that level. And also, you don't have to make things up. I'm always a proponent that we need to craft a strong story, but we don't need to make things up. You can leverage the things you already have. And when you're crafting the story, you may realize there are gaps within the story. And I think those are the moments that you need to rework on your project. Like if this is not coherent, maybe you need to spend some time working on the area to make the story more compelling. Before talking about a few storytelling tips, there's also one thing I want to talk about. One last thing I want to talk about why thinking about the story early is very important. Is because you can start to make you a more compelling product designer or UX designer. Sometimes people use it interchangeably. Is that for product design, because I can use my personal story. I always wanted to work in a tech company, like for myself. You may have other goals, but in tech companies or in companies that value product, that you get to work with PMs and engineers very closely. And it's really about this like PM, engineer, and designer magic. And it actually touch upon a few important things that you wanted to integrate in your story. So what are these? The first component is customer or user. The user, if you have something about users to talk about in your story, then your story is much more compelling as a product designer or as a UX designer. And usually this part, I think for junior designers or bootcamp graduates, they've done a great job about user part. So I'm not too worried about it. The second component is the business components. I saw many people struggle with this part because after all, sometimes the project is not real. It's really hard to talk about the business aspect. And that's why I think don't or try not to think about the story after you finish the project, because you really have nothing to tell. There's no business goals, there's no business problems, and there's no engineering collaboration, right? At that point, you're sort of stuck because you have to work backwards to think of, oh, I wish I had a PM or I wish I had a business factor. If you can think of how important, I think the PM relationship, which is the business aspect, the user aspect, and the third thing is the technical constraints. So it's the technical aspect. If you can build in the user, business, and technical aspect into your story, then you have a much stronger story to tell. And I know it's challenging because for technical constraints, it's hard. How I'm supposed to how to build that in my project if it's not a real project. Well, there's a way to do it. If you can think of that in the middle of your journey, you can try to find ways of it. Like for example, I remember at one point I just used my final design or few design options. I was reaching out to my software engineer friends, asking them, hey, looking at those two designs, what are the potential constraints that you see? Like what are the problems or advantages from the lens of an engineer. And they would provide me a lot of feedback, and I would actually listen to the feedback and did an iteration. So in the future interviews, when people ask me, oh, like Xinran, why you pick this design over the other design options, I can tell, oh, I asked feedback from engineers. Very, very strong, a much stronger storytelling from the lens of product design. And I didn't build that after the completion of the project because that would be too late. Same with the business goal as well. If you know that, oh, the business component is also important to building the story early on, then maybe half in your journey, like halfway towards the completion, you can think about which customer problem may have the biggest business impact. And if I don't have a product manager, is there a way that I can maybe reach out to my product manager friend to understand why one design option is superior than the other design option in terms of the business goal or in terms of the potential business goal? And if you have that in mind, you can direct your case study towards a more compelling space in the second half of your project before it's too late. So that's that, like trying to build the important pieces, important components early on into your story. All right, last but not least, I will share about some simple storytelling tips. The first tip I want to share is about climax. Climax is this term in storytelling. And I think some of you probably may already know the concept because I know you mentioned something very similar, which is the tension and the resolution, which is exactly what I'm trying to tell. Given you have very limited in the presenting your case study, if you were to say, okay, I did this, I did that, and then I did this, I did that, following a linear approach, it's not going to make a very memorable impression. So instead of polishing each steps, usually I would do something different. I would still think about, remember that I mentioned the 1-minute pitch, context, problem, solution? I will think about one level up, which is what to add once I have context, problem, solution, right? And what I would add, the first thing I would add, which is a very important item, is the key design decision moment. It's the moment when there are 2 or 3 design options, why you choose one over the other. To me, this is a very important piece once you have the problem solution clarity figured out. The reason it's important is because that is sort of like a climax to a movie. Remember, the climax in a movie is more about this like the moment with the most tension, followed by a resolution, and that is the moment with the most tension. To the movie, speaking of the movie, The Shawshank Redemption, that is the moment when I think there was like someone figured out that they're behind the poster, actually there's a hole, and the hole is actually whatever, like 15 years of hard work reviewed. And that is, oh yeah, that's a good one, Mary. So that is a very special moment. And I encourage you to think of that moment as well. And one very powerful moment that I can think about regarding product design or UX design is the moment of design decision making. And I'm not talking about early phase, low fidelity wireframe. I'm talking about the high fidelity wireframe, the design decision making. Why? It's because as designers, low fidelity wireframe is hard to really demonstrate your skill. And everyone has gone through this like design decision process in the lo-fi process. So it doesn't really showcase your skill as much. Like for example, in my current day-to-day job, like every day there's just so many lo-fi, with-fi, hi-fi. If you only have to show something, you got to be showing your best work, right? Even the high fidelity design options. We have so many, so many to show in the real job, right? So in the same case with you, you can show like 2 or 3 the best high fidelity design options that you have, and try to justify why you choose one over the other. And that can really demonstrate a skill of a product designer, because you need to articulate your design decision. And that is the moment you may realize that, oh shoot, I was following a linear process, right? I've been making a lot of design decisions in the lo-fi process, but I didn't spend a lot of time on the hi-fi process, right? And I think that's the moment that you can actually dig deeper in your design, really thinking about the problem, and really thinking about 2 equally compelling, nicely polished, high fidelity design, and speaking of why you choose one over the other. And the reasoning is actually probably behind user dimension, business dimension, and the technical dimension that I mentioned earlier. So see, all the story actually fit in one place. And if you can get that moment sorted out, like I choose design option A because although the user said I don't like this option, like let's say the user said this option may not be the best, but I'm okay with it. But the business and tech and engineers feel so strongly about this option. Maybe you proceed with that option, because given that it's so easy to launch, maybe we can launch it and see the result, right? It doesn't take up a lot of time. You can always use those 3 dimensions to justify your design decision. And in the real world, things are not perfect. You always have to say maybe this is like strong in user feedback, but weak in whatever. There's always a trade-off to mention. But those extra dimensions can really help. Like the user dimension, business dimension, and technical dimension that I mentioned. And that actually requires work, right? It requires you to deliberately think of, oh, I need to maybe ask engineers questions or like business related questions in order to get that type of clarity. And those are really the area that can give you a high ROI, return on investment. And once that is clear, if you can think about that slide, that moment, and work hard on it, then what do you have right now? You have context, problem, the climax, which is the design decision slide, and the solution. And that is really powerful. It's already a very robust core of your case study. And if you have more time, you can always add things like, oh, okay, I'm looking at the final design, looking at my key design decision. Maybe I should put that user research insight that actually helped me make the design decision. Or maybe I really need to talk about that success metrics, because it's that success metrics directly speak to that problem I was referring to. And maybe I should mention that user testing session of that particular moment, because that moment is speaking directly to the problem and the solution and the design decision making. So everything come into one piece, and you actually save a lot of time thinking about that way. So that is the concept for climax. So I encourage you to think about one climax that you come up with a design decision. And if you are not ready yet, no worries. You can use the rest of your time to build up the climax. And that actually quite memorable, going to be memorable to the interviewers, as opposed to talking about everything a little bit. Like user research, here's one that's about user research, here's something about user testing, as opposed to just like talking about something a little bit. The climax always leave a stronger impression. The second storytelling tip I would like to talk about is before and after. Remember watching some of the advertisement. This is before using this kind of product. This is after using this kind of product. I've like, let's say, lose weight by 50%, right? Remember this like juxtaposition of 2 things? It sounds simple, but it's also so powerful, because they're like right next to each other. And it is a very effective way of showing what the design look like, and what was the original project, and what is the new experience, and something that you can use in your presentation as well, or the case study crafting as well, is what was the original state and what is the new state. And it is powerful because it is not only very compelling, people can tell your skills within a second, but also it is very straightforward. They don't have to remember, oh, like, wait a second, like, oh, here is a design. What does your original design look like, right? They don't have to think about that original design. So that is very easy to follow as well. The third tip I'd like to mention is called flashback. Remember the movie would use this all the time, where they flash back to original moment of a certain point, and they talk about their childhood. And you can use that in your case study presentation and potentially your portfolio website as well. Is that here is the final product, and how did I get there? I was trying to think of some examples of movies. I bet there are many of them. Is that one at the beginning of the movie, they always start with something fascinating, but it doesn't have to be the end of the timeline, or it doesn't have to be the beginning of the timeline. But in your case, in the case study presentation case, likely you can use the end of the timeline to start with, because that is the most exciting thing. So, for example, let's say I'm presenting my case study or my portfolio. Right after I talk about my problem, I can talk about my final design to get people excited. And then I mention, okay, here's how I got here. And then you go backward to talk about what happened. And in this way, it's much more effective as opposed to just like following a linear order. The fourth tip is zoom in and zoom out. And I use that all the time in my current company as well, like presenting everything. And just because, remember that I mentioned problem solution statement? Some people have very broad problem. Like the problem is that the company struggles to increase conversion of something in general, right? But that is too broad. Usually you can break it into sub problems. Okay, maybe the first problem that contribute to the conversion issue is discoverability issue. The second component, second part of the problem, maybe it's about usability issue. The third part maybe is about accessibility issue. For the sake of time, today I will focus more on the first sub-problem, which is the discoverability issue, because given the context, we think this will have the biggest ROI. And if you have some questions about the third problem, I will more than happy to explain you in the Q&A session, right? So in this case, I'm zooming out to say there are 3 typical problems, and I will focus on the first problem today. So it's zoom out and zoom in type of thing. So you give people an overview of what your case study may trying to solve on a high level, and then you dive into a very specific thing, so that it gets you the best of the both world, as opposed to, only stay on a very high level talking about things without diving deep enough in your craft. The fifth storytelling tip I would like to mention is about it's basically very similar with zoom out. It's about, I don't know anyone of you heard of that. It's like, telling them what you're going to say. I can give you an example. Like at the case study presentation, I can say at the beginning, I can say, I have 2 projects today. The first case study, focus on more on my product strategy, interaction design, give you a holistic view of a launch product. Whereas the second product focus more on my design system capabilities. And I would spend about, let's say, most of my time presenting the first one and spending probably 5 or 10 minutes speaking of the second one. Okay, and now I'm going to start with the first one. So you tell them what you're going to say and say it. And in this way, people are not like caught off guard, like, oh, okay, what are you talking about? Where are you at? So at the beginning, you already give them a reminder. Similarly, you can say, for the sake of time, I probably want to talk about this a little more, but I'm happy to answer any questions, as I mentioned in the zoom out, zoom in, zoom out techniques. So build up anticipation, outlining. Yes, Sonia, I believe this session is recorded. And I'm trying to read out some of the comments because I believe that towards the end in the Q&A session, we can capture all of them. So I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, it's building up anticipation. I think sort of. It's mostly because people wanted to feel in control. Similar with dealing with kids, right? They wanted to feel the autonomy. Same with the interviewers. If you don't talk about what you're trying to talk about, then sometimes you don't know where you're going. And it's good to remind them of that. Like, for example, as I mentioned, like this project focus on this type of skills and this project on this kind of skills. Does this sound good to you? Or if you don't mind, I spend more time focus on the first case study, something like that. And similar with the actual case study presentation, like, it's such a broad problems, it can break into 3 components. And those are the 3 components that we discovered. But for the sake of time, I will talk about the first problem more. And using this way of like framing things, you don't have to prepare for every single thing, because you can always like set expectation. Like even speaking of design process, right? You don't have to talk about design process like step by step. And what I usually do is that, how did I get here, right? All right, here is the key research insight that we found that actually trying about this problem. We have other research insight in appendix, if you wanted to hear more, but at this point I'm focusing on this one. So those kind of like sentences and wording, it's just you're trying to frame the things you really want to talk about, as opposed to talk about everything like a little bit. And the interviewers can understand as well. You're trying to frame or guide the conversation. I'll stop here. And Michael, I know we have a interview session from a sort of like a question and answer based, and there's also a Q&A session after that. And I think maybe as we gradually face into that session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Xinran. This was amazing, packed with value. Really appreciate it. So let's dive into, so for the audience, just a reminder, right? So please remember to put your questions in the Q&A tab. This way you can also upload others' questions, and we make sure that we address the most popular ones and that many people are actually interested in. We'll try to address as many questions as possible. So yeah, please just use that Q&A tab. And also just a reminder, the career transition roadmap summary handout will be available to download. So stick around if you'd like to receive that. Xinran, so let's jump into the interview, and basically I would love to ask you a few questions, and we'll also make it as interactive as possible, and we'll kind of take some questions from the audience along the way as well, to make sure this is very interactive. I know you already covered a ton, right? And do you want to maybe come back to briefly and tell us, just in a nutshell, and like a very quick summary, why is storytelling such a crucial skill that can just make or break your first job search?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Michael. This is a great question. I think, in a nutshell, people have a short attention span, and the interviewers get to view so many case studies and they have to interview multiple people, is if you have a strong story, it will leave a strong impression to the interviewers that you are a compelling product designer because you showcased all the skills that they're looking for.
Awesome, awesome. And I'll see some people asking questions in the chat. So please use the Q&A tab. Would love to see your questions there. All right, I think, yeah, we have folks starting to use Q&A. Amazing. Xinran, what I also wanted to ask you, why and how exactly can one fail a UX job interview due to poor storytelling? Like whatever you haven't covered yet, let us know.
Yeah, that's also a great question. I can use an analogy. Remember you watch a YouTube video or a movie, let's say, or on Netflix, maybe after, let's say, 1 minute, you don't want to watch it anymore. Similar with watching TVs, right? If you wanted to, if that program doesn't really attract you, you probably just like change to another channel. The interviewers, unfortunately, they cannot change to another channel. They have to listen to you. However, there's a mental switch that we're like, okay, usually that happens on what is on the first 1/3 of your presentation. Like say, okay, so this is the business I'm trying to solve. This is the research, competitive analysis. This is my sketches. And they may start to lose interest because the review is so slow. The progression is so slow. It's similar with a movie. Whenever the progression is so slow, then it's very hard for people to follow. They probably just like look at other things. Even if you have a very good design towards the end, it's very easy for them to lose attention and lose interest. And that is not a good sign because you already remember the good movie or let's say a good TV show, they're always trying to capture you at the first third or the first quarter of the or even the beginning, the first 5 minutes of the show, even if the middle part is a little bit boring, right? You can still remember that. So that's why I think a poor storytelling will end up in a failed offer because they wasn't really interested. And after all, storytelling is also an important technique that the interviewers are looking for, because as a day-to-day job as a product designer, you get to present your work very often. Like every week, probably every week, you get to present your design to designers, to your PMs, and even to a larger audience. And that is a very common skill for product designers, for the interviewers to evaluate as well.
Awesome, awesome. So that's great. So let's take a quick question from the audience. I know you guys have been just watching mostly, and I also love how Xinran made this session quite interactive, asking you questions. So now let's take some of your questions. So Megan is asking, do you have any tips on storytelling for a hypothetical project, which is basically not real? I know this could be a very long topic and discussion basically in itself, right? But maybe just like some of the key points you want to mention.
Yeah, hypothetical projects is tricky. It's just like writing novels, right? If the core of the story, the foundation is a little bit loose, the storyline is a little bit loose, it's very hard for you to build on top of it. So I think I have two tips to offer. One tip is you try to make it less hypothetical in the ways that you're asking engineers for feedback, you're asking your PM's friend for potential business implications of your design. You try to complement that as opposed to just keep it a loose foundation, right? You try to solidify the foundation as much as you can. So that's the first tip. The second tip is you say something to show your competence, to show your skills, like to show your awareness. For example, although the case study is not meant to be launched. However, I think about certain technical constraints and I verified it with my engineer friends. Or probably sounds a little bit weak, but like it sounds with validated with other engineers. Or if you lack of business dimension, you can say something like, okay, here's the story, and you say it out loud that although this doesn't have a success metric, but if we were to launch it, those are the 3 key metrics that I would focus on, because those key metrics speak directly to the problem that we are framing. In this way, although you lack of data points to make a compelling story, you can show a strong sense of awareness. I would have done this way if I had another chance.
Awesome. Thank you, Xinran. So Megan, hopefully that clarifies your question a bit. And also, please remember to upvote the questions, right? So just go through, you can look through Q&A tab as well. I have access, and I'm talking to everyone, not just Xinran. You have access to all the questions, so just read them. If you're really interested in someone else's question, make sure you upvote it, right? So this way, it's we'll make sure that we'll take all of those questions. Xinran, anything else you want to add on how storytelling can help make your portfolio stand out?
I think I captured pretty much it. I talk about leaving a strong impression. And storytelling, how you present your work itself, is also a skill that the interviewers are looking for.
Awesome. All right. So let's take another question. So Alina is asking, what is the difference between an outcome and an output in case studies?
Yeah. To be honest, it's a little bit sort of like academic term, but in general, people say, output is whatever you created, right? Those are the 10 Figma files that I have. Those are all the wireframes that I have, right? Like outcome is more tangible, actionable. Like those are the actual results. So I don't really try to differentiate the nuanced difference of 2 terms. I'm more talking about if from a case study point of view, is that an outcome could be a strong solution that actually solve the problem. And people can see that. They can also feel it from your presentation. They can verify it. Versus for output, okay, so here are the just 50 user flows that I created, right? But they were like, oh, wait a second, the problem is not talking about those solutions. The problem is something else. So there's discrepancy of stuff, right? You're talking about like a lot of stuff, user research, like competitive analysis, whatever the artifacts that you have, but they're not actually addressing to the problem you speak to. And the reason why I stress on product solution connection, because that is the core of design thinking, which is how to frame the problem and how to find a solution that actually speaks to the problem. It's the core of design thinking. And design thinking is to me, it's a very important term and concept, but also often overlooked in the UX or product design education.
Awesome. Thank you, Xinran. So what I also wanted to ask you is kind of I love these top 3 lists in questions, so it kind of forces you to focus. What do you think are the 3 biggest mistakes that people make when writing their case studies?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think the first mistake is linear. It's like linear, right? Because people think linearly. The way how our brain works. When I grew up as a child, what we did next, it's very natural. Even let's say we talk about story, right? It's step 1, step 2, step 3. It's very natural to follow a chronological order. However, when you present something, you don't have to do it that way. You can skip some of the steps you can condense some of the steps, and you can move a moment forward, just like a movie. And by doing a linear way, to me, it's sort of like a mistake because it's a little bit boring, right? People have to read all of the stuff until they get to the solution. And people don't have time to read if they have to view 175 portfolios in one day. How are you supposed to expect people to read like novels, right? From step to step, step, step. It's almost impossible. So that's the number one mistake. Number two mistake is that I think usually people write too much in the portfolio and in the case study presentation as well. Because to me, usually there's not a lot of time to read both the portfolio website and the case study presentation. They just don't have a lot of time to read. And also, like, imagine if you were to put some text on the slide, do you expect people to read it or do you expect people to listen to you? Similar with the Apple conference. If they put too many text on the too much text on a slide, I would rather just keep silence so that people can read it. Or I don't show text and I'm speaking through it. So that's that. I think the second mistake maybe is like too many words. The third mistake is I think about what is the important thing that you wanted to highlight. Like what is the core of a presentation? What is the climax that it can make you shine as a product designer? Like you may think of, okay, so this design, it looks good, it looks better than the other design. And you might think that's a good story, but actually it's not. Because when they're judging a product designer or UX designer, usually you get to work in a cross-functional team with PMs and engineers. And if you think through that lens, if you have experience working PMs and engineers, or dealing with business or technical constraints to a certain degree, then that is a strong story to tell. That's why I think the focus of the story maybe it's the third common mistake that people make.
Awesome. Great. Love it that you're always very thorough. Awesome. Great answers. Xinran, can you suggest any good resources to learn more about storytelling?
Yeah, that is a great question. There are some resources out there, and actually I've read quite a lot, but I haven't seen something too great. Some resources they talk about in a very generic level, and some resources they talk about storytelling in a plot writing fashion, which I understand, but to me it's like sort of like they're reuse that content from other industries, but they haven't really integrated into the product design context. So I'm actually in the middle of doing a course about storytelling as well, and I hope I can build that gap. Beyond that course, I think to me, it's helpful to learn design thinking. If you just Google design thinking or design thinking space product design, I think it will give you a lot of insights on why the problem framing is so important and what kind of solution can come out of this problem. I think that knowledge of design thinking in product design will make you a better storyteller.
Awesome. Thank you, Xinran. So what I also, do you want to mention the name of the course? Is it good? Like so far, do you recommend it?
Oh, I recommend because it's my course.
Ah.
I'm in the
Sure.
middle. I'm in the middle of doing it, but I keep you
So
all
you're
posted.
saying you're putting together a course on storytelling?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so definitely whenever you have the information, share it with us. We'll spread the word. I'm sure many people will probably love to take a look. All right, so I want to take Vivi's question. So she was talking how to talk about a problem if you have signed a she first wrote a DNA, which and then she said she meant NDA, and the solution linked to the key business idea and not yet released. Can you comment on like NDAs? Have you faced that type of situation, and how to go about it?
Yeah, it's funny because it's a very common issue, and also for like I know some designer friends from big companies. They sign this contract, but basically they couldn't share everything, and every people do it differently, right? I know some people even look for that like press release of the product, and they literally had to use that snapshot to draw the actual wireframe, because at the time that they left the company, they couldn't take anything from the company, so they literally had to recreate all the design wireframes and waiting for that press release. But that is an extreme fashion. If you wanted to look for a job during this process, I think there are all kinds of creative ways you can do it. You can very important business information. You can say, okay, this is confidential, so I couldn't really talk about it. I think this also, people will appreciate that as well, right? Because you care about the privacy part. But at least I think there's something that you can talk about, that I think you can, like, for example, changing the logo of the company. You may even changing the color theme of the design. And I think user are maybe blur certain things out of the user research or user insights. But I think that's enough. So just like cautiously to be creative, without over exposing the confidential information. I think I did something like that as well, and I mentioned that, like, how those are the confidential information. I'm not, so I couldn't share those, but I can share what I have during the design process, and those are still high fidelity prototypes, that I just basically have to remake things without really touching the confidential information. So in summary, you have to think creative about it. And I would mention that many designers face the same issues, and a lot of interviewers really understand that. It's not that you can just share anything, otherwise you couldn't get a job whatsoever, right? And I know most companies, they're quite tolerant of the things you show, and it's because it's, after all, it's in a design interview setting. It's not meant to be shared out or something. And yeah, it's really use your judgment. It's really a case by case answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Xinran. So I know we're kind of starting to run out of time a little bit, so we'll need to wrap up quite soon, but I still want to take a few questions from the audience, maybe cover a couple of questions quickly. So Melody also asked, what kind of case study problems should we add to our portfolio to make a strong impression? Like anything else you want to add to that?
Case study problem.
Yeah, like what types and kinds of case study problems?
So I can give you an example. Let's say, I'm exaggerating a little bit. The the text is so small, it's too small, right? That is a problem, and that is a customer problem. It's a valid problem, right? But it's so narrow that it doesn't reflect your skill, right? Because the solution is make the text bigger. So while it is a valid problem, it doesn't really show your skill. And another problem I try to avoid is that the business told me to do this, so I did this. It's not really a problem, right? And another problem I try to avoid is that
There is no similar app on the market, so I did one. That is a product problem. It's not a design problem, right? So it's going to be irrelevant with your design solution because it's so high level, such a high level. Things I wanted to avoid as well. What kind of problem you wanted to pitch? Usually, I wanted to keep it not too broad and not too narrow. So that's why I mentioned if you can, remember affinity mapping. If you can think of some key user problems or even the business problem, whatever, you group them into patterns and try to find one problem that you think is interesting and can show your skills as a designer. I can give you an example. Let's say conversion. Conversion problem, let's say it's interesting because it's touch upon some of the user problem and also touch upon it has a business impact. So there's a lot of things to talk about regarding this type of problem versus, let's say, accessibility problem. It is also a very valid, important problem, right? But sometimes it can, you have to narrow down your solutions, right? Because like you did certain things to make it more accessible, which is fine in itself, but it's more about certain types of skill you wanted to showcase. Or do you really want to showcase your accessibility knowledge? If not, then maybe, although that is a valid type of problem, but maybe that's not the core problem you want to address. You wanted to address with something else that actually can speak to user and the business and is interesting, intriguing for a designer to solve and showcase your skills.
Yeah, these are great points. And we actually get this question like relatively frequently in the UX career transition strategy sessions that we run and in the program as well, in terms of like what makes a case study strong and how do I ensure that it's a robust and great portfolio case study, right? So it's also actually important to, especially if you're like earlier on, if you're transitioning into the field, right, to basically select projects and case studies that are not too small in scope, but again, not too large in scope either, and ideally cover like all the key phases of the UX process, or like a lot of, at least some of them, like multiple phases. So definitely keep that in mind as well. That is basically, you want it to be like a sizable, comprehensive case study, ideally for it to be stronger. All right. So we addressed Vivi's question about DNAs and NDAs. All right. Xinran, any tips on making someone's story concise yet still strong and clear? Like anything else what you haven't covered yet, briefly?
Aside from what I talk about, I think it's not gonna get to the perfect place in one iteration. It's just like how writers write novels as well, right? It's very hard to get that concise statement in one run. But it's okay. It's totally normal and common, which is that you come up with a version. Maybe it's a little bit wordy, but it captures everything you wanted to say. And you started to condense it, consolidate it into a statement. If you look at search design thinking resources, usually they manage to put a long story into a pretty straightforward session. For example, for what kind of people? They wanted to do something, but they could not because of something. So I designed something like that. There are plenty of similar templates online if you search about problem statement or problem statement framing. So there's some templates over there can help you consolidate things a little bit. And with the power of ChatGPT, you can always just say everything out loud and try to give me 10 versions to consolidate the story and maybe get some inspirations from it.
That's a great topic. Bring up AI. I know AI is like the hot thing right now, right? We're actually planning to do an event on like UX plus AI, or like future of UX related to AI sometime soon as well. All right, so Tracy has a question that has quite a few upvotes, and yeah, we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll start to wrap up. What are the best ways to explain problems, constraints, and shortcomings from being a beginner in a case study without it sounding like making excuses, but also not making it seem like you're glossing over these issues?
Yeah, this is definitely a great question. So Tracy was referring to to double check with Tracy's question, making sure I'm capturing all the best way about constraint shopping. Sounds like making excuses, not making like. Okay, so the first of all is that you don't have to expose all the information. Similar with movies as well. You don't have to say everything out. It's okay to have space for people to comprehend or just think or even neglect. Like for example, during the presentation of a case study, you don't have to say, oh, this is a project, it's not launched. I work in this in a boot camp, and there's no engineers, no business constraints, no research, no user. You don't have to say it that way. You don't have to expose everything out loud. You can still pitch the most important core of the story. And there are certain things when people ask you, you know how to respond. Like maybe they ask you, hey, why didn't you think about the how did engineer, like, technical constraint? What's the technical constraint about this? How did you factor that in your design decision? And then you can explain that, we have such a short timeline, and the business owner wanted to get to this stage, wanted to launch, wanted to do something which we didn't get to that implementation stage. However, you want to show your proactiveness. I did talk with my engineer friends and ask for feedback. So had I had more engineer resources, those are the things I would do. And had I had another chance, I would have done something. I keep it as a proactive and positive tone, as opposed to, I just like, there's no users, no engineers. Yeah, it's not launched. Well, I don't have success metrics. And it's really a delicate balance, but I think you know what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to overexpose information. You can still stick with the story, and you wanted to show you being proactive. You're aware of the problem of your case study, but you proactively try to remedy it. And I want to give you an example. There are many designers, professional product designers. Their products are not shipped. It's not launched for whatever reason, all kinds of reasons. So I think that is not necessarily an excuse for you, but you need to show self-awareness. Like, had I had more chance, those are the things that I would have done, or those are the metrics I would have done. Or you can talk about next steps. Like next steps, I will do this, and that. And you can also talk about learnings, is that although I didn't have those resources based on the limit of time, based on the pivot of business direction, I learned this, and that, and I will do this and that in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Xinran. This is a great point. So I briefly want to just answer Juan's question. I know it's not exactly directly related to storytelling itself, but I just want to quickly touch on it, right? So he's asking any recommended online certifications that can help a candidate stand out in the application process, Udemy, Coursera, etc. So Juan, it's basically based on our experience, and again, we probably got 150 people or so transitioned and hired into UX roles. It's less about certifications, honestly. It's more about looking at yourself as a candidate that employers really want to hire, right? Even we actually have a whole event just on that. So you can take a look on our site. There should be a recording there on the virtual event recordings. And Mika could share the link as well. Essentially, you just want to build yourself up, right? Just remember those competencies that we covered earlier. And ideally, you want to have some real work, like real experience. And of course, we're biased, right, because we run a program based on like real projects with real clients. But I mean, that there is a reason we do that, right? Because that's what actually hires you ultimately. You also want to really polish your softer skills, and storytelling is one huge softer skill that we are talking about today. And basically, yeah, just select programs that give you those competencies, right? So I'd say, or you could also volunteer or try to do it on your own, like do a volunteer project or a pro bono project, ideally with a team, because that's what employers typically look for as well. So don't look at it. It doesn't matter, honestly, like unless you like get a certificate, you like get like a master's degree from Harvard or Carnegie Mellon or something like that. It doesn't really matter. Like bootcamp names usually don't really mean much. It's more about what they equip you with, right? It's like what are the skills, the case studies, portfolios, and etc. So, Xinran, so Iv is also asked a question that's got another upvote as well. So he's, I'm sure he or she, so they are saying, I grew up in France watching lots of movies without happy endings. So how do you tell a case study story successfully when there is no happy ending, when there's no successful build?
I love it. That's such a great question. And I enjoy watching a movie with not a happy ending as well. So I really appreciate this question. I want to say that there's a it could be a very strong story, given the fact it's not a happy ending, and maybe an even stronger story than a happy story. Like, what would you feel if I say I did this, that, and everything was a success? You know, the stock price raised by 15%. Like, it was such a success. It's not. In reality, it's not something like that. That's why the imperfect story actually resonate with interviewers more, because they know the story, the product development is not perfect. Things are not perfect. That's why I've no examples of people getting a great job simply presenting a failed project, a case study. And if you frame it right, it could be really powerful. I think the important thing about this type of story is that you show self-awareness, and that although it is not a happy ending, but you show that how in the process that you did your best, proactively doing things that you probably wouldn't do people wouldn't do otherwise, and you leave on a positive tone as opposed to it failed, it's miserable, right? You try to have a put a spin to it, and if you put it nicely, it can be really powerful. Because at my company, for example, or other companies as well, there are a lot of failed experiments. There are not a lot of it's not always going to be success. But what matters is what you learned from that experience and what are the next steps. If you saw a failure of some sort, there are a few questions you can think about. Why you thought it's not as a failure? What went well and what did not go well? And if you think it's a failure, then what you would have done otherwise? What are the future steps you would do to make sure the failure doesn't happen again? And it can end as a very positive tone and leave a strong impression to the interviewers, because again, there's no perfect product and there's no perfect human as well. That's why we don't want it to show we are so perfect, right? I'm imperfect as well. So, that can resonate with people.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great answer. I see some applause flying here, and then thumbs up, and so thank you, Xinran. So I'm going to ask you a last question before we wrap up, and then, as promised, we'll also tell you guys about the program that we're running and make a special announcement as well. Xinran, anything else you want to add in terms of why and kind of why can you or will you save lots of time if you start thinking about storytelling even while working on the project, kind of doing it in advance?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that, and I don't think a lot of people touch upon this point, is that, for example, whenever you have a goal, you try and find ways to achieve that goal. Similar with the storytelling. If you have a rough sense of how you wanted to present a story within a very short amount of time, you can use that constraint to think backward. Like, what are the things that I can do to make the story much stronger? If you don't do that early on, or wait till everything, if you wait till the project complete, you wait till your portfolio is completed, you wait till you get the invitation of your interview, then it's just too late. You don't have a lot of time. And also, it makes you feel really bad because I've spent 3 months crafting this portfolio, and then I realized that I have to rewrite my story. And that is a lot of waste of time. And probably you have worked on 10 user flows, and every user flow, you didn't have a lot of time to polish it. You could have spent 3 times the amount of time on one single primary flow that helps resolve the problem you framed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Xinran. Thank you. I think that's a really awesome tip. Yeah, can really save lots of time. So yeah, definitely think about storytelling right away when you guys are working on projects, right? When you're starting or when you're in the middle of it. So like keep that in mind. It's kind of, and maybe the reason I like it also resonates with our starting with the end in mind philosophy, right? And it's that because that helps you get to your goal much more efficiently. Xinran, anything else you want to add in terms of any tips, guidelines, your top recommendation, anything else before we start to wrap up, before I tell everyone about the program and make the announcement, etc.?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I only have one last point to make, is that I know storytelling, it sounds like such a fancy word, there's a lot of learning. How can I learn storytelling? But at the end of the day, it's just you try to make someone understand your story. You try to find a random person on the street, try to find a 8-year-old child from the street and telling them in a concise fashion what you have worked on. And you just wanted to speak human language and simple to understand language to make other people understand. Because after all, they don't have any context. They don't have a lot of context at all. They only have 30 minutes to listen to your story. And it's very hard to understand something if they don't have the context. So it's very hard to follow anyone's story. So my final tip is really try to dumb it down in a very simple fashion. Try not to overload with information and try to speak very simple language. If you think you have to spend too much time talking about a concept, then the chances are your story is not clear enough. You need to cut things out and make the remainder of things more simple and clear. That's it. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Xinran. This was awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed the event and got some great tips on storytelling and portfolios. So as promised, people often ask about our program. So as promised earlier, let me also quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial career prep, master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually land a UX role. So who the program is best for? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and affordable ways and without quitting their current jobs. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. So what's Beginex? Beginex is a part-time UX Career Accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX without quitting their jobs. We're in multiple cohorts and helped over 140 or probably 50 people by now transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by many great companies like SiriusXM, Coach, ABC News, Meta, JP Morgan, Google, many others. Recently, we have also been ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program and featured in Fortune magazine as well. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, The Economist, and many others. What you gain after completing the program is you build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills, including storytelling, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and get ready to land a UX job. In fact, our grads have done so well that we offer a money-back guarantee. You either land a UX job or you get your tuition back plus an extra $300 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginex.com. You'll be able to find the link in the chat. The next start date is October 25th, and our cohorts are small and fill up quickly. So the next one is filling up. So please act soon. Also, to thank folks who attended the event, you will be eligible to receive a $400 tuition credit if you are accepted. Also, if you're a motivated team player who knows UX basics or are willing to learn those independently and need help transitioning into UX, become highly hireable, and land your first UX role, we would like to offer you an opportunity to request a free 20-minute UX career transition strategy consultation with a specialist who helped over 150 candidates successfully land their first UX jobs. So during this assessment phase of this consultation, we will take a look at your background, skills, and experience, identify what is possible for you, what you can do to become a highly hireable UX job candidate, uncover the key bottlenecks restricting your UX career transition progress, create a 3-step action plan that will get you results ASAP, and see if you may be a good fit for our UX Career Accelerator. If not, totally fine, no commitment. So to claim the $400 tuition credit, please go ahead and use the link in the chat and request a consultation now or by tomorrow latest. The session is free. We're here to help. We're happy to help. Why would we give our time away for free like this? The answer is really simple, right? We know that when we do a group of sessions like this, some people love the plan so much that they choose to work with us and choose to participate in the program. If that's you, awesome. If not, that's totally fine too. All right. So we frequently run different types of events. So we'll keep you guys updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every few weeks or so. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful guest speaker for taking his time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you here, Xinran. So.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, so much.